Hello everybody, how are you doing? I hope you're doing well. I am sitting in front of my little altar today. We are having a little sit down video today, even though the sun is shining, it's beautiful outside. However, I just recorded a video application for a job and I have this nice setup and I didn't want it to go to waste because I cut some beautiful sunflowers from our garden and I think they just look so pretty, don't they? I'm so obsessed with this. Anyway, I wanted to make this video already for a while. I know a lot of you are interested in this, and I also know a lot of you will be able to share their own experience down in the comments below about this topic. So yeah, without further ado, let's get started. Today, I wanted to give you some tips that I have learned while renovating on the Azores archipelago. If you're new here, my name is Tasman. I'm originally from Germany, but I moved to the Azores archipelago a few years ago. And I have renovated an almost 200-year-old traditional stone house on Pico Island on the Azores for the last 1.5 years together with my partner. And I've documented that journey here on YouTube. I will leave the playlist link down below if you're interested in like actual visual, seeing how it all came together and the challenges we faced along the way. Feel free to look that up. But today is just a little sit down video talking about some tips if you are planning on buying a house or renovating on the Azores archipelago. So the first thing I am going to tell you, which is probably the most important thing to consider when starting off on this journey, is that it heavily depends on which island you are on. The Azores have 9 islands, some of which are a lot smaller than others, and some of which are more isolated than others, and some of which are much poorer than others. So it makes a huge difference on which island you're on. Depending on which island you are, you will have a completely different experience in terms of buying a house, well, finding a house, buying a house, and renovating a house. This is true on multiple levels. First of all, the culture is very different on each island. Of course, there is something like an Azorean culture. You will find very similar things on all 9 islands in terms of culture and how the people are. Like, for example, they're very friendly to guests usually. They're very likely to share food with you. You have festivals like Espírito Santo and all of these kind of things. So you do have things that you find on all 9 islands. However, the people might vary a lot, and the more time you spend here, the more that becomes obvious that each island and even each town on each island has their own kind of culture and a way that people are. It is just the product of history, basically, because the islands used to be very isolated for a very long time, and even the towns used to be isolated from each other for a long time. It now has not been like that for a while, but still you do see the differences the more time you spend here. Which is why I can already give you the tip that before you decide on settling on the Azores in general, visit as many islands as possible for as long as possible and in as many seasons as possible so you can make a good choice, because it's also not only the people, it is also the accessibility of things. For example, if you live on São Miguel Island, which is the biggest island with the most political power and the most financial power, the best infrastructure, and so on and so forth, it is a lot easier for you because you do have more construction stores, you have secondhand stores, a lot more things are being delivered to São Miguel Island, and you just have also a lot more workers because more people live on São Miguel Island, so you have a lot more companies and a lot more workers to choose from. The smaller the islands get, the more complicated all of these things become. For me, for example, on Pico Island, we do have one bigger construction store, which compared to German construction stores is still very small, but it is reasonable. You get a lot of things there, not everything, but a lot of things, and you do have smaller construction stores around the island, like very small shops that have like things like paint or tools. In terms of workers on Pico Island, you are very limited here. There are some building companies, some construction companies, and there are also freelance workers, sometimes people that do everything and sometimes people that are specialized, for example, in painting or in woodwork or that kind of stuff. However, because there are so few people that are actually very good at their craft and, you know, like are doing their job all of the time, you will have to wait, which brings me to lesson number 2. If you're planning on embarking on this adventure, you need to bring time and patience. This is a huge mistake that we have done because we didn't have the time and probably also not the patience, but we just genuinely didn't have the time because we needed to move in. We had like very messed up deadlines and it was a full thing. But if you can, bring as much time as you can. Things will inevitably take longer. If a company or a worker or your own experienced mind, if you maybe have renovated other houses in other places before, tell you, oh, this will take, give or take, 6 months. Plan a year, at least. We thought our house would take 6 months, and that was also what was discussed with the first people that we talked to. In the end, we moved in 1.5 years later, and our house is still far from done. It has just finally reached a level where you can live in the middle of the chaos. Like literally, if I just move the camera over there, right next to the desk. Where's my hand? Oh my God. I've been working on the ceiling for the last couple of days, and if I turn the camera just a tiny bit more, you see our sofa is covered in plastic, and yeah, so we truly do live on a construction site still. There is unfortunately a thing where a lot of people just don't show up when they tell you they're going to show up, which is a common thing on the Azores. And again, if somebody is in the comments telling me that I'm lying, you clearly don't live here. Stop lying to yourself because everybody has this experience here at least once, usually multiple times, that people either don't call you back, don't pick up the phone anymore, ghost you, or just say they're coming tomorrow at 9 a.m. and on the next day at 9 a.m. you're waiting and nobody is coming for the entire day and they're not picking up the phone and you don't know what's going on. These things are normal and you need to handle them, you need to deal with them. There are also other delays, for example, when materials don't get delivered or you cannot find certain materials for a while, or you have to order something from, for example, the mainland, and you need to wait for the things to be delivered, which can take weeks, even up to months in the winter time. The weather can delay things, or just life. Things here get delayed a lot. You need to deal with it. You need to bring time and you need to bring patience and a lot of grace and understanding for this. There's no need to flip out and scream at people for being late or not showing up. If you decide to move to the Azores, as frustrating as that can be, you need to deal with this and you just need to handle it with grace. That's all you can do. You have no right to scream at people because you have now been warned. This is something that is going to happen to you, no matter how hard you try to avoid that. The next tip I can give you is to inform yourself as much as possible about all the things concerning your renovations. This is not only true for legal stuff, but it is also true of where to get which materials, what is even possible, what are your workers capable of. Also things like deliveries, which companies do deliver here, because a lot of companies do not deliver here. And if they do, they charge you a hefty price and it takes forever. And sometimes deliveries get lost, like our IKEA order that got lost completely, never to be seen again. Things like that happen and you need to be informed. However, I cannot tell you exactly how things are or which material to get or not to get, because it heavily depends, again, on which island you're on. Again, I can just use that example that on San Miguel you do have a lot more opportunity than you have, for example, on Pico. And I can just imagine that if you were to move to Graciosa, Flores, or Corvo even, that it would be a hell of a lot more complicated than it is on Pico. So really inform yourself how things truly are going to look like and how will you get the materials that you need, and just what are you even allowed to do, because that also differs. A great example for that last point is that we originally didn't end up with this house. We originally had another piece of land in mind where we wanted to build a wood house from scratch. And we had already the appointment for signing the papers and, buying the piece of land. However, we had been smart enough to first ask at, oh God, I don't know the English word, municipal, I'm gonna put the English word here. I can't remember. 3 languages in my brain is just too much sometimes. We had been smart enough to look up where exactly our house was because we knew that some parts of this island are protected and you're not allowed to build anything. So we had looked up where our piece of land that we wanted to buy was, in which zone, and it happened to be exactly on the border between the urban area where you're allowed to build a house and the protected area. So we went ahead and we asked the officials that are working in this, and we asked to get an official statement if we were allowed to build our dream house there. And the day before we signed the papers, thank God it came before that, because these things also take a while. Like, don't expect an answer within a day. You will not get it from no one. But the day before we signed the papers, we learned that we were not allowed to build a house, that because it was on the border, it was protected. And while I'm a huge fan of protecting landscapes, that of course was a huge bummer and threw us back a whole lot. But these are the things you need to look out for because there are protected areas. You cannot just do whatever you want. You need to confide by the laws of the region that you're moving to. The same is true if you're restoring old ruins. There might be some laws attached to this, what you can do and what you cannot do. This is especially true if you have a project that is funded by EU money. I know there are some projects out there. I don't know if they're still active, so please don't quote me on this because I never had any experience with that. But there are some projects where if you rebuild a ruin, you can get financial support to a certain degree. However, in order to get that, you need to fulfill certain criteria and you're very limited in what you can do. So these are the things you need to inform yourself about. I cannot tell you what to do, so please don't write me an email with specifics. I cannot answer this to you. You need to ask at the local place that you want to go to. The next huge tip that I have for you is to learn some skills in advance. Maybe you already know some skills. That's amazing. That's great. Bring this knowledge. It is gonna save you so much time, nerves, and money, and all of these things. The more you can do by yourself, the better. Like, unless you really hire one of the big companies that do everything from start to finish, it's gonna be so beneficial for you. And even if you work with one of the big companies, it can be beneficial because you just see if what they're doing is correct and what you want them to do. Because of course there are a lot of things when renovating a house where there is not like just one way, but there are very different ways that you can go about something, and you might have a preference because you have done this in the past, or you might have seen that another way just doesn't work, or yada, yada, yada. So I think it is very beneficial if you know things like how electrical stuff works or woodwork or any of these things. Even just knowing things like that wood is alive is going to save you a lot of time and nerves. Like if you've seen the renovation videos, you saw that our floor exploded in our face, and that was probably the most dramatic thing that ever happened in my life because it was a huge mess, and that would have not happened if we had known how wood floor works, especially with high humidity. So if you have knowledge or if you have the possibility to learn skills before you start, do it. It's gonna be so good for you. Don't make the same mistakes as we did. The next tip is very obvious, but I just want to put it out there, and that is to save money. While you might not spend as much on the property itself when you buy something on the Azores, at least in comparison to, for example, Germany or the US, it might seem very cheap to you. However, due to the fact that things end up taking a lot more time usually than you anticipate, and things like problems with deliveries, problems with materials, etc., just save up a little bit more money. If you think you have enough, just save a little bit more. That's all I'm gonna say. And the last tip I have for you is to be prepared for surprises. Especially if you have an old house like we do, there's always gonna be that curveball that comes out of nothing, or maybe multiple curveballs, like in our case. Things that you did not expect, not anticipate, that nobody could have told you about before. Old houses always have surprises. Sometimes it's funny surprises, like finding very old alcohol in your basement. like we did.
It's not good.
What were you expecting, tell me?
Nothing else. The house was abandoned for years.
Ik bij jou, check. Kom je eens leuk. We will try it.
Oh my gosh! From the bottle!
Angelique, mas tá boa? You said that it's good.
Yeah, it didn't look like it was good though.
And sometimes the surprises are not so good, like when you realize that you have to exchange some of the stone walls, or you have a landslide on your land in the middle of renovations and all of this kind of stuff. So there's always surprises with old houses, and especially on the Azores, nature here is very abundant, and you will also probably encounter some animals, especially if your house has been empty for a while. So these are my tips for renovating on the Azores archipelago. I know a lot of people watching have renovated here and are living here, so please, if you have any more tips, leave them down in the comments below. What advice would you give people that are planning on buying and or renovating a house here? I'm excited to read from all of you in the comments down below, and I wish you a wonderful day. Enjoy the summer. Bye!